Alright, all my duckies out there, welcome to DuckTales Season 2, Episode 1, titled The Most Dangerous Game Night. We open up with our intrepid adventurers in yet another unexplored hidden tomb as they proceed to do what they do best: adventure, explore mysteries, and rewrite history. However, one of our young adventurers is less than thrilled with his current situation and ends up almost bumping his Uncle Scrooge into oblivion. However, they manage to cross over this chasm with Webby and Dewey using their coordinated acrobatic skills, Scrooge and Huey using their intellect and planning, their timing, and Louie just barely managing not to get himself skewered like a kebab. After Indiana jonesing this idol for a moment, getting ready to, do a little cliche Disney action, Louis kind of calls this out, saying that, it's the same thing every time. There's a mysterious new thing. Oh, it was actually this thing. Oh no, it's actually incredibly dangerous. And he just calls it everything out beat for beat. And it's a lovely little bit of meta commentary, but it also kind of plays into Louis' character as a whole. Someone who's easily able to notice patterns and how certain things will go. He's able to see all of the angles. However, Scrooge says that that's not what's going to happen this time. It's not always the same thing back to back. Every adventure is different. However, once Dewey takes the idol, we end up finding out that Louis was exactly right with them running away from certain doom. Something I also want to make note of is the fact that the opening had a few updates, with Gizmo Duck replacing the crazed little bulb in the opening, as well as Magica Dispel replacing one of the Beagle Boys. A nice little touch. I love it when series add that nice little touch of a little switch up of the intro, just showing that they're actually paying a little bit more attention to the ebb and flow of the series. Meanwhile, after the adventure that they've just gone on, Louis is all too happy to crash. However, Scrooge ends up finding a map in the idol's mouth and tells everyone to get ready for another adventure, which everyone except Louis is more than excited for. Louis then professes to Huey that he is getting exasperated by all these adventures as he just feels like too much. However, Huey points out that it runs in their blood. They're a family of adventurers. However, Louis goes on to even state that, ultimately it's adventuring that caused them to lose their mom. Huey tries to point out that, that's because she ended up going off on her by herself. But everyone acting as a team, with Huey as the brains, Dewey as the devil may care, adventurous attitude, Webby as the muscle, and Louie as the dot dot dot. They'll be able to handle anything that comes their way. You know, Huey even shows off his junior woodchuck status symbol as someone who has advanced, but Louis ends up pointing out that one of his little sachet ribbon whatevers is hanging loose, showing that he might not be as proficient as sewing as his merit badge lets on. Naturally, Huey freaks out and says that it might be because of their constant adventuring, and Louis, being Louis, plays this angle, demanding that Scrooge let them take some time off because it's starting to wear on the family as a whole. And he even goes on to say that they should just stay in and have a family game night, to which Scrooge absolutely loses his diddlin' mind over, as we come to find that Scrooge has a plethora of games at the ready. This is ultimately explained by Mrs. Beakley that this is a result of Scrooge's overly competitive nature. And as Scrooge tells everyone to grab a buddy, with him grabbing Scrooge, and of all things saying that if he loses, he's out of the will. And I love Donald's response of, I was in the will? Like, really? I was still in that? Who'd have thought? Naturally, Dewey and Webby pair up, as you know they've been in sync and inseparable this entire time, and of course using this as an opportunity to get as far away from the calamity as possible, Duckworth pretends that he's phasing out of existence, leaving Mrs. Beakley to team up with Launchpad. Louie ends up teaming up with Huey, who is distraught over his sewing skills and is desperately trying to reapply his badges. However, they're interrupted by the appearance of our good friend Gyro Gearloose, who has created something called the microphone, which is capable of, you know, embiggening the voices of microscopic people which are living in the McDuck Manor household. Is also able to grow and shrink things at will. With Louis, you know, wanting to avoid any further adventuring, shrinking down Gyro Gearloose and basically calling out everything that's going to happen, saying that he's probably fine. He's probably tried to conquer their people. They'll probably end up being attacked by ants, and they'll probably learn some lesson about trust and understanding. With it playing out with Gyro basically using his, a fountain pen to woo over the microscopic populace. Naturally, we switch back to you know, the family playing charades with Scrooge and Donald kind of understanding what the other is thinking because they've spent so much time together. However, they naturally do end up getting into an argument because it's Scrooge and Donald, and there's no other way their relationship would go. However, we ultimately also see that Webby and Dewey aren't quite as in sync as they seem to think, as Dewey is completely incapable of guessing what Webby's charading, whatever, gesturing, despite the fact that Webby's hints are actually fairly obvious. Louis, however, continues to warn Huey that they should do nothing in order to bring to the family's attention the situation with Gyro, threatening that Huey will probably be unable to properly apply his merit badges ever again. However, they end up re-encountering Gyro and the teeny tiny inhabitants, with Gyro stating that the populace have become fed up with the larger Duck family household, as they have inadvertently destroyed a plethora of their cities and have declared war on the people. And after an attack by some ants, they end up rapidly firing off the shrinking beam, even ending up shrinking Launchpad inadvertently. Also, though they do make sure that Launchpad is okay, he ends up becoming allied with Gyro and the microscopic populace. Miss Beakley uses this opportunity of losing Launchpad in order to kind of sneak off to avoid any further calamity that will go on because of this family game night, where we see the family playing Jenga, with Scrooge and Donald just bickering back and forth. However, when it becomes Webby and Dewey's turn, ultimately, despite the fact that Webby is only bringing out one block, another of the blocks is moving by itself. We come to find out that this is the result of Launchpad, Gyro, and the microscopic populace saying that they're trying to dismember the Duck family's Tower of Wisdom, as they call it, ultimately causing the entire situation with Dewey and Webby bringing down the blocks and ultimately seemingly crushing everyone as a result of their hubris. And as Huey and Louie go digging through thinking that Gyro and the others are dead, they ultimately are relieved to find out that they managed to escape the collapsing tower. However, they also find that the microscopic populace has come to the assumption that this was a trap and decide that they will ensnare the entire Duck family. Louis continues to lose his mind over his lack of control of the situation, with things just continuing to spiral beyond his control. And Huey just kind of calls him out, like, why are you so against this? You've been down with adventuring all up until this moment. Why is this any different? With Louis just kind of stating, it's just like, because I'm not good at it. I don't feel that I'm as capable as the rest of you. Our mother was even good at adventuring, and even she was unable to avoid ending up lost in space. So what chance do I have of making it out on the other side okay? And though Huey really just kind of calls him out on this, it's like, are you really going to put our family in danger just because you're afraid? If anything, you're causing more problems than, keeping us from it than anything else. We also ultimately see that the microscopic people have, staged a coup on Gyro and Launchpad and have decided to take the microphone in order to wreak havoc. We then cut back to Scrooge and the others playing Scrooge's own versions of Monopoly, Scroogeopoly, where it quickly becomes obvious that Scrooge has the deck stacked against everyone else, as he's the only one who really understands how the game is played. Only for the entire family to be shrunken down and presented with Gyro and Launchpad taken prisoner by the microscopic inhabitants. Louis and Huey end up seeing the situation go down as they are taken prisoner, and trying to re-enlarge one of their family members, they accidentally enlarge one of the microscopic inhabitants. Louis tries to figure out what he's good at and what he can do in order to help, figuring that he actually understands the angle, the ebb and flow of how things work, where, he's more of a tactical mind, if anything else. And he starts delivering out orders to the rest of the family, telling Launchpad to start just crashing into people in order to to disrupt how they work. Having Scrooge try to corral the microscopic people back into a certain corner of the board, with telling Huey to tie up the giant microscopic person in order to, keep him out of the way. And as Scrooge, Launchpad, Donald, and Gyro are, start to be, put down, captured by the others, we see that the device is just dangling up in the air, and that Webby and Dewey need to get up there, but because their teamwork has been so, inadequate and infrequent, they're not sure if they'll be able to handle it. However, Scrooge ultimately tells them it's just like, it's okay if you don't really think you get along that great as friends. That's family for you. Family doesn't always get along the best, but they know how to work together. And with that, he ends up catapulting the two up to one of the flies, taking control of the microphone. They end up, taking control of the fly, just, swinging it all around the rest of them and bringing down the contraption into Louis' hands. He ends up shrinking one of the enlarged microscopic person, and they capture them all under one of the game pieces. And they enlarge everyone else, bringing this adventure to a close. However, Louis feels that he is probably in trouble because he pretty much set all of this into motion. But Scrooge does not berate him for any of this, simply stating that Louis, understood how everything would go. He understood so many things that Scrooge just overlooked. He knew how to he knows how to play people. He knows, what people are thinking and how they'll act and how they'll perform. Even setting up all the microscopic people with a place to live on the game board. He says that while he, got his fortune by being smarter than Smarties and tougher than the Toughies, he also got it by being, what did he say? I forget the exact term that he used, but, he used his cunning. Being smart and strong is one thing, but being cunning, understanding the ebb and flow of how a battle or a life will go, is what got him his fortune to begin with. And he ultimately presents the idol that they got from the previous adventure to Louis, hoping it will ultimately become what sparks Louis to create his very own fortune one day, with Louis taking it as his own personal number one dime and creating Louis Incorporated, his own business to one day create his own personal fortune. I think this was a very fun episode and a very interesting episode at that, as it really does solidify, how Louis sees himself. That existential crisis of, their what they know about what happened to their mother and how it's affected them in certain ways. Seeing the friendship that's really, phenomenally blossomed between Dewey and Webby, and just seeing how certain characters, interact with each other. It's also great that we actually got to see Duckworth actually a little bit more in an episode outside of just a little cameo here and there, because ever since we got the reveal of who he was and the fact that he was still lingering around the house, he hasn't really been involved that much, so I'm glad we got to see it here. Although I question the fact that he wasn't really involved with the situation with Magica Dispel. But overall, this was a fun episode. I loved Gyro just bursting in, just saying, "Adventure!" Because it just shows that when he thinks adventure and weird situations and opportunities, he thinks of the McDuck family, which was a very common thing in the original series, where it would just be him adventuring with the boys just for the heck of it, because they're one of the few people willing to put up with his zany antics. But this was a very fun way of just reintroducing ourselves to the whole McDuck clan. So many of the characters were actually just here. Nothing took place really too much outside of our core cast, and that's a great way to just get everyone into the mindset of this whole family dynamic. And Louis is a very less than pronounced character. He's always so laid back and kind of reserved in how he acts, with you only ever seeing his love for money and manipulation shine through more than anything else. But it's great to just see him just kind of apply that to just trying to keep his family out of trouble for a little bit, even a minor bit of time, and his inadequacies as a member of this family. It's very rare to see Louis act inadequate to any, extent of the mind. Just, it's so odd, but interesting at the same time. But that's this show in a nutshell. Odd and interesting. But tell me your thoughts on this episode in the comment section below. Do you wish it had been something in relation to the plot with their mother, or do you think this was a good way of reintroducing people to the Clan McDuck? And if you liked what I had to say about this episode, leave me a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave me a dislike and tell me what I'm doing wrong. And subscribe for more episodes of DuckTales. Thanks for joining me.